Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today guys, I have something cool. This is my review of Boosh, A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdalla, which is the first book in the Ashes of Avarin series, which, when I talked to him, he told me it was going to be like 4 or 5 books. This self-published novel is Abdalla's debut, and man, I saw this on Twitter. Like, someone had linked the cover, and the cover just looks freaking awesome. Like that red tree and the sword, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. And I clicked on it, and then I saw it was for ARC on Netgalley, and I checked it out, but I don't really like, starting stuff that I don't know, and I don't like getting a ton of ARCs unless it's, Tchaikovsky or Parker or, the standard stuff that I read ARCs for. And I also don't read a ton of self-published stuff just at the moment because I'm trying to catch up with all this backlist stuff I have. But I read, because the cover was awesome, I read like the first few pages or so because he had it on his website, the preview of the prologue, and I thought it was really interesting. And so I said, you know what, why not? I'll go ahead and grab it. And at the time, there are 0 ratings of Goodreads. The book wasn't even in Goodreads when I grabbed this ARC. It wasn't on Amazon. You couldn't find it except on his website. And I was like, well, how am I gonna link this or whatever? And it's up there now, obviously. But so it was on a complete whim, and I read it the last couple weeks. I read it, and man, I was extremely pleased. So let's get down to business. A Touch of Light is really a 3 POV novel. We have Adrian, who is the prince of one of the countries in the Domain, and the Domain, it has this main religion. They worship the Seraph, who created humankind, and then they started fighting each other, and they polluted her world with their wars, which caused death, because the Seraph is the representation of life. And so she left the world and has left the humans with their mess. And so people in the Domain are supposed to preserve life. Death is not spoken of. If people die, you are supposed to forget about them and not think about them. You're not supposed to dwell on death. You're not supposed to kill people. And people who are blessed by the Seraph can live really long times. Like, there's people who've lived like 130, 140 years, and that is seen as the Seraph's blessing. Likewise, if people die early, that must mean that the Seraph did not approve of their shenanigans. And also, the Seraph has also promised that she will return one day, and there will be it's like the new dawn. It's not what it is, but it's something to have to do with dawn. Promised dawn. And the people, the worthy, who have been preserved, because the unworthy, when they die, if the Seraph decides all of a sudden they're not worthy, they burn them, and no one thinks about them again. But the worthy get preserved, and they get put in these crypts, and when the Seraph comes back, they're going to come back to life. And that is a really cool concept. That's what sold me to start with. So Adrian is the prince. Before the prologue, his brother has been killed in the south, doing a mission for their dad, the king, and he does not know why, and that is his really raison d'etre, is to try to figure out what happened to his brother and why. Another POV we have is in the Domains. It's Lynn, who is a sentinel, who has kind of like run away from the order because there is this madness kind of that was taking place in the Domain, and she was kind of in charge of dealing with it, and the death that she had to bring upon people, because she is actually a sentinel, which is part of the religious order, and they are really the only people who are kind of authorized to do the cleansing. So if people need to be killed, the sentinels go and they do it because they're cleansing, and they kind of take on the burden of all that death, and what other people and other followers of the Seraph aren't supposed to. And she is just guilt-ridden by dealing with that, with the madness and purging it and stuff, and so she's gotten away from it. And freaking guys, the Sentinels, this was so cool. The Sentinels bond. Each Sentinel bonds with a Griffin, and in battle, the Griffin don't have to be there. There's a bonding ritual that takes place. I'm not going to say a ton about that. You'll see. But each one bonds with the Griffin with a specific emotion, and they can feed off that emotion from the Griffin, or give it to the Griffin and use these kind of powers. So Lynn, her Griffin, she channels her anger into her Griffin, and it gives her super strength. Like, she can leap off a wall and lands like Thor, like when he lands from the Bifrost. and, you know, she's unharmed, or she can, like, you know, and punch through like a gate, but she has to feed off that. But the problem is if they feed too much, if they draw that too much, their mind breaks apart and they become hollowed out. And so they have to keep like these things that ground them so they can stay in reality. And then the third POV takes place in the Clanlands, and our main character there is Nasha, who is what's called a sloper, and there's these clans in the south that used to be one, and they're broken into four, and they don't necessarily all get along, but one of these clans lives on the freaking sides of a volcano. It's so freaking cool, and what Abdalla's done with the Southlanders is they feel very distinctive culturally from the Northerners in the domain. Because, one, I really like when you just feel immersed in a culture. Like, they don't even have a word for volcano. They just call it the Great Fire Mountain. And unlike the Domain, who worship the Seraph, not so in the Southlands. In fact, they believe that the weak must be cold and that death has to be visited in order to restore that lifeblood to the earth. There's like this, for them, there's like this evil goddess who sleeps, and the only way she sleeps is by human blood. And so when these people are living forever in the Domain, the Clanlanders are like, they're going to bring about destruction because they're living too long, they're not feeding enough blood to the earth. And so any kind of weakness, you know, the clansmen kill and feed it back to the earth, and they make sure that there's repeated killings. Like, they have situations that will call for these deaths so that they can keep putting the blood to keep the evil goddess sealed. And so these three POVs are separate, and they are in separate locales, and yet their story weaves together. One of the things that I really like is that Abdalla weaves in a lot of stuff, and he weaves in a lot of things and doesn't really call attention to it. So, careful. This is a book that I encourage you to carefully read, because careful readers will pick up on things that, like little clues that have been left for, how are these scenarios connected? Wait, oh, hold on, is this? And I thought that was really cool when I stumbled across these things, because when you find one, you're like, oh, you feel smart when you catch it. And when I finished it, I talked to the author a little bit, and he's like, hey, did you notice this one thing? I'm like, I did notice that. Oh, I get it. That's what that was for. And I went back and reread it, because I was also trying to read this quickly because I was running out of time at the end of the month. And so I did not read it as slowly as I would have liked to, or to catch all these things. But going back and reading the chapters, like, oh man, that was freaking obvious. So the strengths that Abdalla has in this novel is not, I don't want to disparage anything, but sometimes I think self-published novels can be less polished than they could be. And I know any of you who read self-published regularly, we all know what that feels like, where you're reading it and it just feels like it did not go through a traditional publisher's hands, where there were, rounds of edits and everything feels where it flows, and the grammar is strange, there's grammar mistakes or weird sentence structure, etc. Abdalla, I never once felt like that reading this book. This felt like a fully polished, traditionally published novel as far as the writing and just there not being a bunch of distracting syntax problems or just stuff that doesn't feel like it was worked well enough. This really does feel pro. Abdalla has done a great job here. In addition, I really like the way that he describes things. He uses very specific, and you guys know, if you've seen my Pratchett reviews, I really love specificity in descriptions, and he does this as well, where it's just like, this would ordinarily be described this way, and that's fine, you just brush it off. But it's like, oh, I would not have thought to call attention to that specific detail. Where it is not bogged down in details like your Jordan or your Tolkien's, where there's just big, huge paragraphs of description, it moves along at a very brisk pace. And it does not dwell on things any longer than it has to. There is a lot that happens in this 400 and some odd pages. A lot. And that is because scenes go boosh, 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 boosh. Stuff happens really quickly. It's called a touch of light, but it should be called more than a touch of betrayal. Man, oh, there are many turns of fortune, and oftentimes they happen quickly. It's hard to get your bearings because events just continue to snowball and boulders come downhill. I think these characters all feel very unique in each different point of view. They don't feel like you're reading them from the same. Adrian is just driven by he's got to know what he has to know. He has to have answers. Lynn is just consumed with guilt, and meanwhile Nasha we know that she has some curse where we don't really know what it is, but she can feel the emotions of other people as well as, her emotions are heightened. And if she feels too much of these emotions, she will suffer some kind of break that she's desperately trying to avoid, and we don't know what will happen when it does. And so she is trying to prove herself to these people in the village who don't really like people from the slope of the volcano, and also trying to figure out why there is this blight upon part of the clan lands. Something that many of you who read epic fantasy a lot will be pleased to know is that there is not one time, not a single time in this whole book that any character mentions, thinks about, or whatever. There is not a single mention of a female character's body in this whole book. Not one looking at the supple body hidden beneath the whatever that you see in all of these fantasy novels. Not once. It does not dwell on the body parts of the female characters, which you wouldn't think would be something you would have to be like, oh wow, except that it happens so frequently in fantasy novels that it's really surprising when it's not there. Additionally, glory be and the saints be praised, there are no murderous bullies. Not one murderous bully. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, there are people who try to murder each other, but at least it's not a murderous bully. One thing that Abdalla does exceptionally well is battle scenes. The conflict scenes where a part of it felt like some of the larger scale battle scenes felt reminiscent of kind of a John Gwynne battle sequence to where, there's ravening hordes of bad guys and you have the proud and the few standing in their way, and it's just this really intense, violent, but oh my gosh, are they going to win kind of stakes. And these combat scenes, they are brutal, and the one-on-one ones are almost worse than the large-scale battle scenes, because, oh man, some of that stuff's like, it's just like, ow. And the last 10% of this book is exquisite. The last 10% of this book is just really, really good. And I am excited for the second book to come out. Now, some themes that are discussed in this book, there's a lot about life and its purpose. And what is the purpose of a extraordinarily long life if you're not doing anything with it? Like, what is the purpose of gifts if you're not using them? The clansmen, the Ronar, on the other hand, believe that all life that is wasted must be taken. They don't live as long lives. It's that classic theme of, if you live a long time, everything's not quite as urgent. You can play the long game than the people who don't quite live as long. They constantly say, blood holds ties. This kind of debate of trying to figure out what is keeping them going. What makes this noble family special? What gives them blessings? Is it their bloodline, or is it the blessings of the Seraph? Should they have faith? And there's a constant exploration of where to place your faith. In the Seraph, who has left and is planning on coming back once the world is prepared for her, or do you place your faith in the people in front of you? And with that faith, is it misplaced to put it in the Seraph? Is it noble blood, or who you're descended from? Is that what makes you great? Or is it the Seraph's blessing and your faith? And so there's a lot of people wrestling with their faith in this book as they deal with some of the real horrors that appear in Avarin. There are several things in this book that I did not see coming. You cannot predict everything that's going to happen. You can't. It is oh, it was an exciting book. Now, on a couple of the criticisms that some of you may, and these may bother some of you more than it bothered me, there is, because of the brisk pace and the kind of complex but not weighted down, not dense writing style, Abdalla clearly wants to get from one point to another, and he leaves clues out in plain sight, and he doesn't really include anything that isn't extraneous, but sometimes this can feel almost skeletal, to where, as I said, some of the turns of fortune happen very fast, to where I didn't really even get to kind of process the current happenings before the happenings were flipped on their head again. So some of the scenes I would have liked to have been expanded, maybe some downtime where the characters can talk to each other and you could learn more about them. It's a small complaint because it just didn't slow it down. It kept going. But so there were a couple scenes. I can think of one scene in particular that I just thought happened too quickly, and I really wish it had lasted a little longer. All that being said, on the Kingfin approval system, I was at an excellent plus for most of this book. It was just, it was good. It was sitting at 4 stars, and then the last 10% of this book happened. Boosh, whoop, Kingfin approval system, superb minus. I really, really enjoyed this book, and since I finished it and was talking about it with RJ in my Discord, and then some with Abdalla himself, I enjoyed it even more. Like, I was thinking back on it, and so superb minus, out of 5 stars, 4.5 stars. I am hoping that the next book I can give an easy 5 stars. If any of this sounded interesting to you, please check this book out. It comes out today. I am actually making sure I am going to bed late because I had a whole bunch of crap to do and I wasn't able to film this before right now. It's literally midnight and I'm filming this so that you can see this today on release day. So please, go buy this book if it sounds interesting at all. Look at this gorgeous cover. I really, really recommend this, and please come and talk to me and RJ about it. If you've read this, please, in the comments, tell me what you thought about it. So guys, that's it for me for today. I'll have the author's webpage and where you can pick up this book down in the description, as well as information about my Patreon and Discord. So that's it for me, guys, and I'll see you next time.